back to another great episode in the making here at IT Pro TV. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Wes Bryan, and coming back at you with more VMware. That's right, we're coming back at you with VMware Certified Professional version 6. Joining me back in the studios today is none other than Mr. Don Pizzette. Don, how you doing, sir?
I am doing great, Wes. Ready to dive right back into the world of vSphere 6. And, well, wait a minute. We're not actually jumping into the world of vSphere 6, are we? We're going to jump into the world of vSphere 5 or vSphere 5.5 because, believe it or not everybody goes straight into vSphere 6. In fact, it's pretty common for you to go to work somewhere or you're already working in an environment and you have a previous version of vSphere in place. And that's where we're going to start this episode, is with an older version of vSphere. And what do we do with an older version? We upgrade it, right? We need to get to vSphere 6 so we can take advantage of all the features that we've been talking about in this series or that we're going to talk about in upcoming episodes. So that's what we're going to focus on right here. And I know I've mentioned upgrades at least briefly in a few other episodes, and this time we're actually going to do it. Upgrading vSphere is not that hard. There's just a lot of steps to it, and it takes a lot of time, and there are a lot of spots where you can make a mistake. So it's important that we understand the steps, we understand the process, and that we go through it effectively and efficiently. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight the official VMware 4-step upgrade process and see how that goes into play. And on the exam, that's what we need to remember, is that there's these 4 phases that we need to step through as we upgrade. In real life, you'll find that there's probably 7 or 8 phases that you really want to go through, but for the exam we've got 4. So it's not so bad to kind of memorize it and have a handle on that. All right, so let's do a quick overview here of what the phases are. So in the official VMware world, we've got 4 phases. The first phase is very important. Phase 1 is upgrade vCenter. You always upgrade vCenter first, right? Remember, in the vSphere suite, you got a lot of products. You've got ESXi, we've got the vCenter server, you've got your SSO servers, you have your, maybe you have Horizon View or whatever other products you've got in place, all these different components. So which one do you upgrade first, right? Where do you even start? You should always start with vCenter. And the reason for that is a version of vCenter, a new version of vCenter, can manage old products, but not the other way around. You can't have an old version of vCenter managing newer products. So for example, if I have vCenter 6.0, it can manage ESXi 3.0 machines, 4.1, 5.5, whatever. It can manage all those, right? It doesn't care. It's the newest version. It understands how to deal with those older hosts. But let's say I was the other way around. Let's say that I had a vCenter 5 system and I bring up an ESXi 6 machine. Well, vCenter hasn't been updated to reflect that new host version, and it's not going to be able to manage it. It won't recognize that host. It won't bring it in, and so now it's going to fail. So if we upgrade our hosts first, we're going to end up in bad shape. You're going to break vMotion, you'll break the distributed resource schedule, you're going to break a lot of stuff, right? So we need to upgrade vCenter first. And then after that, we can start upgrading our other components and we're safe, but vCenter is where we start, right? And it may be that you choose to do an in-place upgrade where you just upgrade your existing system, or maybe you just decide to start from scratch, start over. So bring up an all-new vCenter 6 box and then have that vCenter 5 or whatever box just go away, and then that's the end of it. You got a couple of choices there. But phase 1, upgrade vCenter. Once that's done, then we move into phase 2, and phase 2 is where we upgrade our hosts. The ESXi hosts that you've got deployed, upgrade them. We're not in a big hurry on this, right? We could do it weeks or months later if we wanted, years later, or we could do it right away. It's up to you, but we need to upgrade those hosts next, all right? Once that's done, then we tackle our virtual machines. That's phase 3. Our virtual machines, there's 2 things we upgrade on them. There's the VMware tools, and there is the hardware version of the virtual machine. And we've talked about that in some other episodes too. When you create a virtual machine, you pick a hardware version, version 10, version 11, and it's all about compatibility. You might not want to update your hardware version right away. If you're doing vMotion and you still have hosts that are different versions, you might not want to move a virtual machine to a higher hardware version and limit the hosts that it can reside on. So you might want to wait. But if you've upgraded all of your hosts, then you can upgrade your virtual machine's hardware version, and now you can take advantage of that. Usually we don't worry about it. The hardware version of a VM, what does it give us? It gives us usually access to more RAM, access to more storage, but if you've already got enough RAM, you've already got enough storage in that VM, then you really don't benefit from bumping up that hardware version. We might not worry about that, all right? But updating the VMware tools, that's really important. And so we'll see that later in this episode too. We've got to get those tools updated so the virtual machine knows how to talk to vCenter. vCenter will know how to manage those virtual machines even with the older VMware tools, but it'll throw up a warning, and to get the best compatibility, we need to update to the new versions, right? And then phase 4, the final phase, is where we kind of wrap up our last couple of things. We need to tackle our data stores. And I usually do this in real life land in a slightly different order, but this is the official VMware 4-step. The data stores, if you've got VMFS 3 data stores, then we can update them to VMFS 5. Now, remember that with vSphere, they don't update VMFS with every single release. So there was version 3, and now there's version 5. There was no version 4, and there is no version 6. So if all of my data stores are already VMFS version 5, when I do the upgrade to vSphere 6, there's nothing to do. Data stores are already upgraded. Okay. So the let me recap the 4 official steps. Upgrade vCenter, upgrade your hosts, upgrade your virtual machines, and then upgrade your data stores in that order. That's the order that VMware recommends. All right. Now, let me put a real world spin on this because I normally change things around a little bit. I like to add in a different phase 1. For me, phase 1 is back up the current environment. Back everything up, because upgrades go wrong all the time. There's all sorts of little things that can cause an upgrade to fail. You might be upgrading your database and the database crashes or the server doesn't update. Your host OS that you're running vCenter on might have a problem. The vCenter upgrade itself might fail halfway through. If you have a backup, you can quickly restore, no sweat, right? You're back in business pretty quick. If you don't have a backup though, you're really going to be hurting to get that environment fixed again. So for me, phase 1 is take a backup, right? Then I upgrade vCenter, and then I upgrade my hosts. And then for me personally, I usually update my data stores before I start updating my virtual machines. And the reason I do that is because there's a few spots where you can run into errors when you go to upgrade. You can actually run into errors when you're upgrading hosts too. So you could even upgrade your data stores prior to upgrading the hosts. That works for shared data stores. Doesn't work so well for local data stores though. So you kind of have to work out what's best for your environment, and you can do that update, right? The reality is the data stores aren't updated all that often, and going from 5 to 6, there is no update. So you'd really only bump into this if you were going from like vSphere 4 up to 6. If you're skipping a version, you'd run into that problem, right? Then we get to that upgrade the virtual machines, which is their phase 3, would be like my phase 4. And then you have update the data stores. There's one more phase they leave off, which is updating your network, right? We have these virtual switches, our vSwitches and our distributed virtual switches. Those have updates also. And so we might want to update that to the latest DV switch version 6. And so I usually do those last, right? Upgrading the virtual switches is the last thing I do because typically upgrading a virtual switch doesn't improve stability, it adds features. And we can wait on features. I don't necessarily need those features on day 1. And the latest version of vCenter, if I'm running vCenter 6, it supports all the virtual switches way back to, I think to 3.0. So it goes back past VMware's currently supported OSs. So you can bring up those old vSwitches and they run just fine. So that's usually kind of low priority for me. So VMware's official one, let me just recap this for the exam. Upgrade vCenter is phase 1. Phase 2 is upgrade your ESXi hosts. Phase 3, upgrade your virtual machines. Phase 4, upgrade your data stores, right? That's the official VMware way. The Don way, phase 1, take a backup. Phase 2, upgrade vCenter. Phase 3, upgrade your hosts. Phase 4, upgrade your data stores. Phase 5, upgrade your virtual machines. Phase 6, upgrade your vSwitches, right? So my way is a little more complex, but I take into account a couple of extra things that are kind of nice to do. For the exam, just remember their 4-step. That's the one that they want you to remember, right? And I'll put a link in the show notes for you guys that goes to the official upgrade page for VMware, and you'll see their 4 phases. They're detailed. Really, I mean, that is the way they recommend it. All right. Another thing to remember is that a lot of these upgrades are one way, right? If I upgrade the hardware version of a virtual machine, and then I decide that there's something wrong and I want to downgrade, there is no downgrade functionality. The only way to downgrade is to roll back a snapshot. So if I have a snapshot of the virtual machine, I can roll it back. If I don't have a snapshot, I got to go to backup tapes, right? And either way, snapshot or backup tape, I'm going to lose data, aren't I? If I upgrade that hardware version and it's in production for a day, and then I decide it's not right and I want to roll it back, I'm going to lose everything that was done that day. So you want to avoid doing downgrades wherever possible. And the best way to avoid doing a downgrade is testing. Always test it out. Test out the new version of vCenter, test out the new version of ESXi, make sure it works in your environment. Do good testing, research and development. And once you know it's nice and stable, then roll it in production, right? Also, consider upgrading just one host and not all of your hosts, right? And that way, if you have problems with that one host, you can just move the virtual machines off it and you'll be okay. Versus if you upgrade all your hosts, now it doesn't matter where you move your VMs, they're all on the new version of the host, right? These are all things that we need to think about when we're doing an upgrade, all right? So those are important. We need to understand those. But once you get past that, then it's time to actually do the upgrade. And the upgrade's not so bad, right? So let's start with phase one. I'm going to skip my phase of doing a backup. I know in real life I would never do that. Backups have saved my bacon more than once, right? They're definitely important. But we're going to do a separate show on backups. So you'll get a chance to see backing up vSphere in another episode. But when we're ready to do the upgrade, there's a couple of things that we need to think about for phase one. Phase one is upgrading vCenter. Well, vCenter has more than one component, doesn't it? We talked about how in vSphere 6, we have our two main components, which is the vCenter server, and then all the other services get stuck into the platform controller, right? So we have the SSO and those features that are stored as a separate service. So if they're together, if we did an embedded install, we can just do what's called an in-place upgrade, and it'll upgrade both of those systems for us, no big deal, right? But if I split those apart, if I have my vCenter server running on one system, and I have my single sign-on and all that running on a separate system, now I need to upgrade the individual components, okay? And you still upgrade vCenter first, and then do the single sign-on and other components second, right? So vCenter server is always first, whether it's an embedded install or whether they're separate, you still do the vCenter server first, and then the other components come next, all right? Now, in vSphere 6, we just have two components, right? The vCenter server and the platform controller, right? So the two different pieces, and that's it. But in earlier versions of VMware, in vSphere 5.5 and earlier, you actually had all these different individual components, right? So you had, I think it was 5 different components because single sign-on was its own thing and the certificate services was its own thing. So in theory, you could have it spread across many different machines. Well, you upgrade vCenter first, and then the other components, it doesn't necessarily matter the order, but you typically want to do them around the same time. So you want to upgrade them all about the same time after vCenter is done, right? So when we do that upgrade, for the most part, it is literally popping in the disk and running the installer. It'll sense the installed components and it'll upgrade them, right? So it's not a hard thing to do. But one area that can be a little difficult is the database, right? If I was installing vSphere 5 right now, vSphere 5 supported Microsoft SQL 2005 and Microsoft SQL 2012. Or, I'm sorry, Microsoft SQL 2008. Sorry, let me get my database versions right here. 2005 and 2008. Well, vSphere 5.5 added support for SQL 2012. And now we're in vSphere 6 where we have support for SQL 2008 and SQL 2012. Notice how vSphere 6 doesn't have support for SQL 2005. So I might have vSphere 5 running with SQL 2005. And if I upgrade to vSphere 6, vSphere 6 doesn't support SQL 2005 anymore. So my upgrade journey would actually start with upgrading my database, right? Upgrading the SQL database to a version that's supported by my new vSphere install, right? Same thing goes for Oracle. I might need to upgrade that. So those are kind of some key components there. The other thing is, if I was running vSphere 5 and I just did the embedded install where everything was installed on one vCenter server, then it sets up a database using Microsoft SQL Server Express, the little free version of SQL that you can get from Microsoft. They don't support that in vSphere 6. In vSphere 6, you have the little PostgreSQL database, Postgres, right? So it's got a Postgres database it uses instead. Now, on a positive side, when you do the upgrade on a standalone install, so if you're upgrading that all-in-one vCenter server, it'll actually convert the SQL Express database to Postgres for you. So it'll convert that over, whether you want it or not, right? They don't support Express anymore, so that database will be killed off, and Postgres will be brought up, right? So embedded installs are super easy to upgrade. The appliance install, same way, right? An appliance install is basically an embedded install, and it all gets upgraded at once. But if you split them out into separate components, you may need to upgrade your database server first, right? Once that's done, then we can jump into the nitty-gritty of upgrading the vCenter server, right? So let me just mention appliances one more time real quick. I'm not going to do appliances here in the show because they're super easy to upgrade. When a new version of vSphere comes out and a new version of vCenter server comes out, when you have an appliance, you're not allowed to log into the appliance and upgrade the underlying infrastructure. It doesn't let you do that. What you do is you go into your VMware account, right? You go to my.vmware.com, and you'll see the downloads for the new vCenter server. And you'll see the client plugin as one of the downloads. And when you download that client plugin, that's what you run on your own machine to connect to the appliance. And when you run that client, if you're running the version 6 client and it connects to a vCenter 5 server, it's going to see that it's out of date and it's going to offer to upgrade. And you click upgrade. It's really hard, right? You just click that button and then it upgrades itself. It just takes care of everything for you on the back end. It's an appliance, so VMware knows everything about that install. They can upgrade it without your influence. All right, so that one's easy, so that's why I'm not going to do that one on the show. Where it gets hard is if you built your own vCenter server, because now VMware doesn't know your install, and now it's up to you to do it, okay? So let me show you what that's like. I've got a vCenter 5 system up. Actually, I think it's vCenter 5.5. So I've got a vCenter 5.5 box up here, and I'm logged in, just kind of tooling around here in the system, and I want to upgrade this vCenter box to vCenter 6, right? I'm going to start right here, phase 1, upgrade the vCenter server first, right? And so if I dive here into my vCenter server, and I'm just going to verify here, mine's called WinServer 01 because I'm not good at creative names. And if I dive in and look, there it is. So my vCenter server is actually a version 5.5, okay? And as I look at the other components inside of it, I'll say this is 5.5, but I've actually got a host in here. So this ESX host 01, and if I look at its information, ESX host 01, I couldn't find my 5.5 ISO for some reason, so I did a 5.0. So I'm actually going even further back in time on that. See how I'm using a 5.5 vCenter server to manage a 5.0 host, right? You always upgrade vCenter first because a newer version of vCenter can manage older versions of hosts, and that's exactly what I'm doing right here, okay? But I want to upgrade my vCenter server. I want to get this guy upgraded to vCenter 6.0. So I need to go to the server itself, which I've got right here. It's a Windows Server 2012 machine, and I want to upgrade it. So assuming that my database is supported and assuming that my host OS is supported, then I'll be able to upgrade to this. If they aren't, I might need to upgrade those components first. I did an embedded install, so I'm actually running the SQL Express database on the back end. It's going to upgrade that for me, all right? And then my host, well, I'm running Server 2008, at least I think I am. Let me verify that. And I am. I'm running Server 2008 R2 standard, okay? vCenter 6 supports this. If I was running Windows Server 2003, vCenter 6 does not support that. And so I would need to upgrade my host OS first, right? Although, as I think about it, I don't know that vCenter 5 supported Server 2003. I can't remember. It might have. So if it did, I'd need to upgrade my host OS. But my host OS here is fine, so I'm ready to do the install. And the upgrade really is a matter of just popping the DVD in the drive. So I've got the DVD right here. And when you launch the DVD, you'll see VMware vCenter server. Here's my vCenter server for Windows, and I can just start the install. When I start the install, it's going to fire up and see how it's extracting upgrade scripts, right? It sees that I'm running a previous version of vCenter, that I'm running vCenter 5.5, and so it knows that we're going to be upgrading to vCenter 6, and it's going to walk me through that process. Now, what are those upgrade scripts? Well, a lot of them are just scripts that copy files and put services into place. But the important ones are the database scripts. It's going to automate the installation of Postgres, and it's going to automate exporting the SQL data from SQL Express and importing it into Postgres. So that process is going to happen. Now notice here, it's telling me vCenter single sign-on 5.5 and vCenter 5.5 are detected. It knows that I did an embedded install. They're both here on the same machine. And so they're both going to get upgraded to vCenter Server 6. If I only had one component on here, it would detect that I had the two, and I'd need to upgrade vCenter first and then go upgrade the single sign-on server. All right. So it's just giving me kind of a summary here of what it's going to do and how it's going to bring everything up. And it's warning me about the platform services controller that I mentioned earlier, because it combines a bunch of services that were separate under earlier versions of vCenter. All right, as we move forward, we get to accept our license agreement, which is always a blast. And then I've got to authenticate against single sign-on. Okay, now technically, it hasn't asked me for a password yet, so I could just be any Joe Schmo that popped the disk into this server. Now, obviously, if somebody has access to your server to that level, you got bigger problems. But we just need to authenticate with whatever our administrator account is. And so I'll punch that in. I will try and punch that in. There we go. And if I have different credentials for the vCenter server and for the SSO, I can go ahead and punch those in, but I'm using the same one, so we can just stick with that. And now it's going to reach out. Now it's doing what are called pre-upgrade checks. Here's where it's looking to see, is my host OS supported? Is my database version supported? Is SSO functioning without errors, right? Because if there's errors, it's not going to be able to do the upgrade, right? So it's going to check all of that and make sure that my system is healthy and that I don't have anything that's incompatible. If I have something in my environment that is not supported in vCenter 6, it's going to tell me. And that way I can stop right now. We haven't changed anything. So if this errors out, then we can stop and we can go and resolve the problem at our own pace. You know, because nothing has changed, nothing has stopped, nothing's moved. It's all just kind of running routinely. So hopefully everything checks, and here we go. I did get one little warning. It's telling me my vCenter server name needs to be changed. Oh, okay. So what it's warning me about here is that my server has a fully qualified name, winserver01.lab.itpro.tv. It wants to change it to just win-server01, a single name, instead of a fully qualified name, all right? And it's telling me it wants to do that in order to align with the detected certificates and upgrade vCenter server. So there's some certificates that were issued by vCenter, and they were issued to the single name instead of the fully qualified name, because that's what they did in earlier versions of vCenter. If I were doing a clean install of vCenter 6, it would be okay with a fully qualified name. But since I'm upgrading, the previous versions handled names different, and so it's going to have to change that name. I'm okay with that. We can always, work to retool that later on. So I'll go ahead and say OK to it. And now it says I'm using Microsoft SQL Express database, which is no longer supported, right? So it's going to migrate that to VMware's vPostgres. So it's going to do that for me. Fortunately, we don't have to do it, right? You don't have to be a SQL expert or a Postgres expert. It's going to do that for us. All right. Now we get the port numbers. Now, when we did the install originally, you were asked all these different port numbers to pick from, and you'll see some of these are locked in that we can't change, right? These are ones that it's going to have to use as part of the upgrade, and we use for managing the system. But there's some new things, like our dump collector port, our syslog port, and auto deploy, where we can modify those ports at this time if we want, right? I'm going to leave mine at the default, but this is a chance to modify those. All right, lastly, we get our installation directories. You typically don't want to change this, right? It's going to be installing pretty much the same place that vCenter 5.5 was on, or 5, whatever it was. But notice this, export your 5.x data to. When it does the upgrade, it can export our previous data and store it, so that if you don't have a backup and things really go wrong, you do have a way that you might be able to recover some data. Let me tell you, I've only done that once in my life. It is not easy. The data is stored in a way that's not designed to be directly imported again. It's really designed so that if you have to call support, they can look in there and see how things were, not so much restore from it. So it's not a substitute for a backup. Definitely take a backup of your system before doing the upgrade. All right, we'll go ahead and hit next. I get my chance to join the VMware Customer Experience Improvement Program. I'm going to pass on that because it's a lab environment, and so I'm not going to help them. And that should be everything that we need. So it just gives me a quick summary of what it's going to do, right? It's going to upgrade vCenter, and then right down here I can just verify. It says, I verify that I have backed up this vCenter server machine and the embedded Microsoft SQL Server Express database, right? You want that backup. And then we can hit upgrade. Now in the background, what it's doing is it's taking vCenter down. It's going to stop the services. It's going to shut that off. So now we can't get into vCenter. Our virtual machines are still up and running. Our hosts are still up and running. It's just vCenter going down, which means if the distributed resource scheduler is running, well, it's not running anymore, right? So we're not balancing our virtual machines anymore. Our clusters are still running, so if one host goes down, another host could recover for it, but for the most part, all of our automated activities kind of stop while this is happening. Our hosts are up, Our virtual machines are up. Your end users can be in the system. It's just vCenter that's down, right? And it's going to perform that upgrade and get it in place. And once the upgrade is done, vCenter will come back up and reach out and connect to all of our hosts. And then the distributed resource scheduler will start working again, and all the other little components in between our systems start working again. Your end users probably won't even notice this happening. So theoretically, you could do this in the middle of the day. I'm not a big fan of that. I usually do it after hours. But in theory, you can do this in the middle of the day, and once the upgrade is complete, nobody notices. Now, when we upgrade our hosts, yeah, people might notice that, right? But when you're upgrading vCenter, it's just the admins. You know, we are the ones who go into the vCenter server. Your end users typically don't, so they don't notice. All right. In the background, it's upgrading the database, exporting SQL, putting it into Postgres, turning that on. Then it's replacing all the websites that are a part of vCenter and getting those put in place, upgrading my client, upgrading the other services, single sign-on and the other components, and then starting them up. And when it's all done and started up, it'll finish, and we'll be able to go back into our vSphere web client or fire up our other client, and we should be in vSphere 6, or vCenter 6 at least. We're not fully in vSphere 6 yet because we haven't upgraded all the other components, right? So really just vCenter 6. Now, usually with these episodes, I kind of just talk about some other technical details while the upgrade is running. But let me tell you guys, this upgrade takes a long time. If we look at my screen right now, I just have a little blue bar that's crawling across the screen. See how it says exporting data from the 5.x product, right? It's exporting the SQL data and exporting configurations and other data. It's going to take a while. Right here it's doing my license data now. So it's going to take a while to export. It hasn't even started the upgrade yet. Even though the blue bar is more than halfway across, it hasn't actually started the upgrade. It's just exporting data, getting it ready to import into the new environment. And this process can take anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours. I've seen it take as long as 2 hours before, and our episodes are certainly not long enough to handle that. So I think we're going to use a little TV magic to jump ahead on this one. So instead of sitting here just watching this blue bar crawl across, when it's done though, it is somewhat anticlimactic, because what we're going to see is just a screen that tells us the upgrade is done, and now we're able to log into the new vCenter and start to manage it. All right, so here we are about 25 minutes later, and the upgrade is actually finished. And when it's done, you know, it just comes up with a setup completed screen. I've got it pulled up right here. So I can see that my vCenter Server 5.5 is upgraded to version 6.0.0, and we're ready to rock. Now, it gives us a few post-upgrade steps. First off, it's telling me, hey, you upgraded, that's great. Regardless of whether you had a valid license or not, you're now in evaluation mode, right? Because if it migrates over your 5.5 license, that doesn't help you with 6. So we've got 60 days to put in a valid license here. At the end of 60 days, vCenter is going to stop working. So we definitely want to upgrade that. Then you've got your exported data. The exported data there is to help you. If something goes wrong, you've got this data from the 5 or 5.5 environment you can go and recover. But if you don't need it, you can go and delete that data out of there. It's taking up hard drive space, not usually a lot, but it is taking up some space, right? Then it's letting me know here that as long as the upgrade went smoothly, we're now running Postgres. We don't need SQL Express anymore. So you can uninstall SQL Express. If you don't need that one, then you can get rid of it. And then lastly, it's just telling us that single sign-on has been migrated, and so now we can log in with the account we just used, in my case, administrator at vSphere.local. All right, so technically we're done, and we can finish that up. All right, now, technically, it is done. Personally, I usually like to reboot the server. The reboot's not required, though. It's upgraded and it's done. Everything's kind of restarted that needs to be restarted. But normally, I follow this up with uninstalling SQL, which does make me reboot the server. But I'm going to skip the reboot here just to save a little bit of time. But typically, you'd reboot right here. All right. Now that it's done, I can jump over to a web browser and try and log into my client. Now, I was logging in with win-server01.lab.itpro.tv, and remember how it changed the name? This will actually still work, but the certificate name's not going to match. Now, I'm using self-signed certificates anyway, so the name doesn't really matter, but I'm going to go ahead and just try and follow the rules here and go to win-server01 and browse to log in. Okay. Now, when I log in, it doesn't look too terribly different here, so I don't actually know. Am I still on 5.5 or 6 or whatever? We don't quite know. And the first time that you log in, it is going to be slow because the new system is getting loaded. All right. Now, once you're in, now we can figure out whether or not the upgrade actually finished. And so when I come in here, I can see there are vCenter server systems with expired or expiring licenses in your inventory. That's my first hint that everything worked. That I was running 5.5, which was licensed, but that license doesn't work for 6. And so now I've got a license complaint, right? I'll just get rid of that for now. Let me kind of shuffle this screen around to get a little more screen real estate, and then we'll do the real check. The real check, actually I don't even have to go too far. Notice all this extra stuff on the left side? One of the things I hated about vCenter 5.5 and earlier was that the home screen had a next to useless navigation bar over here. We almost always just went straight to administration and that was it. Everything was under there. But now I can see where I've got my VMs and templates, my hosting clusters and so on. So I can jump right into these and get to where I need to be, right? So, whoops, so then I can click on the wrong thing. Well, this will work. I'm gonna go to my server, so Win Server 01, and I'm going to go to Summary and just verify that it shows up as 6.0. And sure enough, I can see that it's now version 6, right? So the upgrade is completed, and I'm now running vCenter 6.0. Now, I've upgraded vCenter, and single sign-on came along for the ride because it was an embedded install, so all that's upgraded, but that's the only thing that's been upgraded. If I have vRealize or Horizon, VMware View, those things, if I have my ESXi hosts, my data stores, my virtual switches, none of those are upgraded. vCenter 6 supports all the old versions, so it leaves them at the old versions, and that's where they're sitting. And we can verify that real quick, right? So if I take a look at my, let me switch over to my hosts. I've got this ESX host 01, and if I look at its data, as I browse in here slowly but surely, we can jump in here and see that it's running ESXi 5.0. Okay, so it's still running the previous version of ESXi. If I go to my data stores might be VMFS 5 because I came from ESX 5, or my data stores might still be VMFS 3. But again, vCenter 6 supports those. So if I dive into my data stores, let's just take a look at the data stores. I got a couple of data stores. I've got one that's VMFS 5 and one that's VMFS 3, right? It didn't upgrade that one for me. It leaves it there. And if I take a look at my switches, I've got this server LAN DV switch. And, you know, that little crash, that's always a fun one, isn't it? It's a little bug in vSphere 6. I guess that's another way I can verify that I have upgraded is the vSphere 6 bug is there. Whenever you go to a DV switch, you got like a 50-50 chance of the UI crashing. So as soon as it reloads, I'll be in there. But I can go into my DV switch and I can verify that it is actually still running the previous version. So I'm just gonna try and navigate in here and get to its summary so that I can see right there that my DV switch is still running version 5.0. It's telling me upgrades are available, right? But I'm still running version 5. So vCenter's upgraded, all of my other components are the same. That's nice because it means I didn't interrupt service. I never took a virtual machine offline, I never took a host offline, my switches, my data stores, everything stayed online during this upgrade. I just upgraded vCenter. And now I can proceed with the rest of the upgrade and upgrade all the other components.
Don, we appreciate you taking the time to show us phase 1 here and upgrading your vCenter. But speaking of phase, looks like we're coming to the end of another episode, so it's probably time to phase this episode out. I know we've got additional parts coming, but before we sign out, you got any additional information?
Well, there's the whole backup thing that I keep mentioning, right? I can't understate that. It's so important to take a backup of vCenter because if you screw something up, it can be really difficult to rebuild that. Also, know that upgrades aren't required. You could do a clean install instead. If you're really worried about things moving smoothly, sometimes it's easier just do a clean install and then move all your systems over to it. You can certainly go that route, but for the exam, they want you to know both kind of methods. We've seen clean installs, that's not exciting. In-place upgrades like these, though, are really nice because all of your settings and configurations come right along and you're in business. So for backups, definitely check out our backup episode because we'll cover how to do that, how to get everything backed up and make sure you can restore it and know that you're safe when you're doing an upgrade.
Well, Don, pleasure having you in the studios with us and pleasure having you, the audience, watching. Signing out for IT Pro TV, I've been your host, Wes Bryan.
And I'm Don Pizzette.
And we'll see you next time.